Last year, the Detroit Lions finished in second place in the NFC North. And today I'm going to be telling you that the champions of the NFC North next season will be the Detroit Lions. For starters, even though the Lions didn't win their division last year, they still had the best divisional record out of the 4 teams as they went 5-1 against the Packers, Bears, and Vikings. Taking a closer look into the Lions' divisional matchups last season, their first NFC North game was against the Vikings in Week 3. This game was earlier in the season, as we know the Lions were stronger down the stretch, but the Lions only lost by 4 points and they should have won this game. There was a few questionable coaching decisions towards the end of the game which kind of gave the Vikings the edge, but that doesn't matter. The key takeaway from this game was Justin Jefferson. Jefferson was held to just 3 receptions for 14 yards, a career low by Aaron Glenn's Week 3 defense last season. The Lions had the youngest team in the NFL last season, and it's unbelievable how they are able to pull this off Week 3, as we know they are much stronger down the stretch. The next divisional matchup the Lions had was against the Packers, and it was a defensive battle. The only reason the Lions won this game was because their secondary making some huge deflections, and of course, Kirby Joseph's 2 interceptions and Aiden Hutchinson's interception. It was surprising how the Packers defense was able to shut down the Lions' top tier offense, but we saw how the Lions played throughout the second half of the season, and I don't think a game like this would happen again next year. The third matchup the Lions had was the very next week as they narrowly defeated the Bears. The problem with the Lions in this game was they had no answer for Justin Fields as he ran for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. And we saw the same struggle from the Lions later in the season when they could not stop the run against the Panthers. They couldn't stop it up the middle and they couldn't stop it to the outside. However, the Lions offense was still fairly dominant in this game. They didn't put up as many points as I would have liked to see, but they laid down 24 at least. The fourth divisional matchup came when the Lions took on Minnesota again at Ford Field. In this game, the Lions offense was way too much for the Minnesota Vikings defense to handle. Goff laid down 330 passing yards with 3 touchdowns as the Lions won by 11. However, the Lions secondary could not stop Jefferson as they did in Week 3 as he had 11 receptions for 223 yards. Now for the last 2 divisional matchups, Week 17 against the Bears, this was just a killing. The Lions secondary was good, but it was Justin Fields. He was 7 for 21 for only 75 yards. It's not saying much because Fields isn't really respected as a passer. I do think he can still throw the ball a bit, but we have yet to see Fields have a dominant or at least a solid passing season. In this game, Jared Goff had 255 yards for 3 touchdowns. Jamal Williams had over 140 yards rushing. The only negative was, again, the Lions could not stop the run as Fields ran for well over 100 yards. And then for the finale, the Week 18 matchup against the Packers. If you say the first Lions win over the Packers was lucky because Rodgers had 3 red zone interceptions, sure, but this game was not lucky at all. The only thing I could say that was a little lucky from this game was Aaron Jones's fumble, which the Lions recovered. However, the Lions still forced that fumble. The Lions secondary in this game was great, holding Rodgers to under 200 passing yards. I don't think the score reflects how much the Lions dominated this game. And I say the Lions secondary played great judging by their defensive roster and how bad they had played earlier in the season. Kirby Joseph, rookie, really stepped up and looks to be a potential all-star. And a quick recap the rest of the NFC North games. The Bears still got owned by Aaron Rodgers. Earlier in the season, the Vikings killed the Packers, and then later in the season, the Packers killed the Vikings. And the Bears narrowly lost to the Vikings earlier in the season, and then they took on the Vikings again. Week 18, Justin Fields sat out. It was a free win for the Vikings. First, for some analysis on the Bears. Their defense last season finished dead last for defensive points per game allowed. And you can see Minnesota there finishing in 30th and Detroit tied for 28th. The NFC North last season had 0 defense. However, the final 3 games of the season, the Lions did finish in 11th for defensive points per game allowed. Looking at the offensive side of things, the Bears still weren't much better as they finished 23rd for offensive points per game. So let's look at how the Bears improved their offense and defense this offseason. Starting off in free agency with the offense, they signed offensive lineman Nate Davis, which should really help the Bears offensive line with protection for Fields and the run game. They also signed 2 new running backs, Travis Homer and Donta Foreman. I think Foreman will be a solid running back, but neither of them replaced David Montgomery. And lastly, with the offense, they also signed tight end Robert Tonyan, who should be a good tight end to pair with Cole Kmet, as we saw him break out towards the end of last season. Defensively in free agency, the Bears made a lot of moves, signing 3 linebackers, Dylan Cole, TJ Edwards, and Tremaine Edmunds, with Edwards and especially Edmunds being the big signings. And the last two, the Bears signed DeMarcus Walker, defensive end, to a 3-year deal, which should really help getting pressures on the quarterback and stopping the run. Out of all the Bears defensive linemen last year, not one of them had more than 3 sacks. Lastly, the Bears signed defensive tackle Andrew Billings, who seems to be a solid pickup. Also, everybody knows the Bears acquired incredible wide receiver DJ Moore while trading their #1 overall pick in the draft. Looking at the Bears 2023 draft picks, they took an offensive tackle early, and then they seemed to focus a lot more on defense. The Bears really needed help everywhere, as they were the worst defensive team and one of the worst offensive teams, but they only took 1 offensive lineman, and as I said, they seemed to focus more on defense. A lot of Bears fans complained that Justin Fields was so bad because he had no offensive weapons and because the offensive line was so bad that Justin Fields was constantly getting pressured and having to make crazy plays, run around from defensive players, and that's why he wasn't good. Well, the Bears improved their offensive line with Nate Davis during free agency and then Darnell Wright during the draft, but those are the only 2 moves they made with offensive linemen. They do have a lot of new defensive players, and we have yet to see if they will all mesh together and play at a high level. If they do, I think the Bears defense will improve, but I don't see this team, with the additions that they have, being able to be contenders to win the NFC North. They do now have DJ Moore, they have Chase Claypool, but he didn't really have much of an impact. Mooney will be back from injury, so if Justin Fields shows that he can be a solid passer, the Bears might have a little bit more of a chance, but I just don't see this team bouncing back that much from being the worst team in the NFL. Some say the Bears tanked. I don't really think so. They just had the worst defense in the NFL. The Bears will definitely improve. I should hope they'd improve from their 3-14 record. I think a lot of it is on Justin Fields. Can he be a passer? But looking at this team, after being the worst defensive team in the NFL last season, besides their linebackers and defensive end they signed during free agency, I don't see a lot of new game changers. We'll have to see how their draft picks pan out. I just don't see this team coming back from 3-14 to winning the division. Moving to the Vikings, we all know the Vikings were the biggest frauds last season, winning tons of one-score games, and then in the playoffs they made Daniel Jones look like an all-star, and then they lost at home. Sure, the Vikings were 13-4 last season, but I definitely think that was a big fluke. I feel like it'd be hard to argue that it wasn't. I definitely don't think the Vikings will have near as good of a record this upcoming season. The Vikings were one of the worst defensive teams last year. We saw them get destroyed by the Cowboys at home. That was pretty embarrassing. During free agency, they made a lot of moves. They signed 3 different defensive linemen. They're really focusing on trying to pump up their defense. Moving to the Vikings draft picks, they selected a wide receiver to pair up with Justin Jefferson. I'm surprised they didn't go defense, but they at least did select 3 defensive players right after that. I think this defense should improve a bit more than Chicago's defense, but I just don't see this defense moving up that much from being the 3rd worst in the NFL last season. Offensively, Minnesota's pretty strong. They finished 8th overall in points per game, but I think this team regresses next season. They finish more 9-8 or 10-7, maybe getting into the wild card round of the playoffs, but I'd honestly rather pick the Packers to finish higher than the Vikings. I love Kirk Cousins, but he won't be able to lead a strong offense to make up for the struggling defense like he did last season. I definitely don't see the Vikings and Kirk Cousins leading a powerful march through the playoffs. Like last year, Daniel Jones walked all over the Vikings. It was quite embarrassing. Next year's schedule doesn't look very promising for the Vikings. They're going to take on the Chiefs, Chargers, and 49ers all at home. Then they're going to have to travel to Cincinnati and Philadelphia to take on the Bengals and Eagles. Those will be really tough games as the Vikings got killed by the Eagles last season. The Vikings are also going to have to travel for the Broncos, Panthers, and Raiders. Those teams are all kind of up in the air. They could be good, bad, or maybe mediocre. And now lastly, moving on to the Green Bay Packers. Fuck the Packers. I'm joking. Looking at the Packers last season, they finished 13th offensively and ranked 16th defensively, a pretty solid all-around team. Obviously, the big storyline we all know is Jordan Love will be the starter as Aaron Rodgers has departed to the Jets. It looks to me the biggest decider when thinking how the Packers season will go is, will Jordan Love be a solid quarterback. I personally think that Jordan Love will be great. I have high hopes for him, and it's sad to say as a Lions fan, but I think the Packers have the best shot at winning the division if the Lions don't. The Packers have a solid offense. Aaron Jones in the backfield, then out wide they have Romeo Dubes, Tour, Christian Watson. They picked up Jaden Reed from MSU, who I'm excited to watch play. Defensively, the Packers have a pretty strong defensive line and some great cornerbacks. We all know Quay Walker is pretty solid, and Jair Alexander. Looking at the Packers free agency, most notably they didn't really make too many moves. They signed safety Moore, who will be really solid, and they signed another special teams player. Looking at the Packers 2023 draft, they had a ton of picks, 13 of them, and they took pretty much everything you could think of. Most notably, Lucas Van Ness. He should be solid for the Packers defense. They took 3 wide receivers again. Jaden Reed. I think Jaden Reed will be great next season. Overall, the Packers took a ton of players. They're bound to hit on at least one of them. I think Jaden Reed and Lucas Van Ness should be or could be game changers, but besides that, no one really notable. Now that we've looked at the other 3 teams in the division, here are my predictions for the NFC North next season. Now, I swear I'm being unbiased as a Lions fan. The Lions should be pretty dominant next season. I have them going 13-4. To me, it'd take a lot for the Lions to really throw away that many games with how much talent they currently have and how good they were at the end of last season. I think they continue to ride that train and keep cranking out wins. For the Packers, I believe they'll go 11-6. I think the Packers team is stronger than the Vikings. They have a stronger defense and a stronger offense. A lot of it is riding on Jordan Love. I have high hopes for Jordan Love. I feel pretty good about Jordan Love. I think he'll be a solid quarterback and be at least a game manager. For the Vikings, I currently have them at 9-8. I wouldn't be too surprised if the Vikings drop to last place in the division if the Bears somehow really put things together. A lot of it's obviously riding on Justin Fields. He is very explosive, but can he pass, and can the Bears defense step up a little bit? And then the Bears will be 6-11, 4th place in the division. Maybe the Bears get 3rd place. I think that's their ceiling. It'd be a lot for the Bears to recover from being the worst defensive team and one of the worst offensive teams last season. With who they've added, they may be able to take 3rd place, but not higher than that. So I talked about the other 3 teams in the division, what they did during free agency, what they did during the draft, and I talked about the Lions earlier on, and I mentioned the Lions had one of the worst defenses in the NFL last season. Why am I putting the Lions at number 1? Well, the Lions have an extremely solid quarterback, Jared Goff, and had one of the top offenses in the league last year. With that said, they greatly upgraded the pair of running backs they had from DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Additionally, the Lions brought Marvin Jones back for a 1-year deal, and Jameson Williams will be fully healthy and active after week 6, so it's safe to say the Lions offense will be extremely scary next season. Defensively, I know the Lions had one of the worst defenses in the league last year for points per game allowed, but down the stretch you saw the Lions defense really improve. The Lions were the youngest team in the NFL last season, and we saw the team grow together throughout the season and become stronger and stronger every game. The Lions also saw day 3 2022 draft pick James Houston, who didn't initially make the 53-man roster at the beginning of last season, come out for his rookie debut against Buffalo on Thanksgiving, and throughout the last 7 games of the season drop 8 sacks. In the draft, we saw the Lions pick up Jack Campbell in the 1st round, linebacker from Iowa, who will be unbelievable in coverage and hopefully be good against the run. And we saw the Lions get the best safety of the draft, Brian Branch from Alabama. And continuing on defense, a lot of people said they would have liked to see the Lions sign more defensive players during the draft. Well, why would the Lions do that when they already did that during free agency, as they signed Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Gardner-Johnson, and Cameron Sutton? The Lions have a top-tier offense alongside a top-tier secondary with CJ Gardner-Johnson, Mosley, Sutton, the evolution of Kirby Joseph, and Tracy Walker back from injury, and the new addition, Brian Branch. The only worry I still have with the Lions is their defense against the run. They have great players on the line with Houston, Hutchinson, but they still seem to struggle a bit against the run. Let's hope this offseason during training camp and the preseason, Aaron Glenn leads this team to really improve, because it's not always about what players you have, it's what you do with those players. So we'll have to see how do the Lions do against the run next season. Maybe they'll be good about it with new defensive strategies and the new players. Maybe they'll still struggle a bit. I'm not worried about the struggle against the run though, because with an elite offense, an elite OC Ben Johnson, an elite secondary with the new additions, I think it'd be hard for the Lions to lose just because they're not the best team against the run. In the end, the Lions seem like the most complete team to me. I think it'd be crazy if they don't win at least 11 or 12 games. I think it'd be a lot for them to throw that bad. The Packers are second for me. The Vikings are third. The Vikings offense, I just don't have full faith in them for some reason, and their defense scares me. And the Bears, I don't see the Bears bouncing back to second or first place in the NFC North after the season they just had. But hey, maybe it can happen. That's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoy my content, I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And once again, as always, thanks for watching.